Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor for me to be part of this important conversation about new strategy of communication with Russia. And I want to start, of course, with the words of appreciation and just thank you very much to members of European Parliament for their support they give to me and my family during this. Some events recently happened with me, and it was very important, not just for me, but for all Russian people, because as absolutely correctly said Mr. Chairman, I'm definitely not the first one, and unfortunately I will not be the last one who poisoned or killed or treated in this way. And it is extremely important for Russian people to know that Europe in whole and the European Parliament will not keep silent on such an events. As far as I understand now in the European Parliament, it's a big and very important discussion about new strategy, how discussing the ways with communication with Russia, and I think it is time to develop a new strategy, not just correct the old one, but really develop a new one, because we knew kind of new type of Russian government, a new type of Russian state, actually, an absolutely new one compare what we have even 2 years ago. And I would say that basic of a new approach should be very clear dividing two things. Russian people who must be welcomed and treated very warmly from European Union, from my perspective, and Russian state, which must be treated like a bunch of criminals who are temporarily took over the power. And maybe it sounds radical, but well, especially from my personal point of view, I think it's a very fine defining of what they are. They are a bunch of criminals temporarily took over the power in our country. And let me be more specific about things I think should be applied from European Union. The issue of sanctions, discussing all the time, and issue of forthcoming election discussion all the time. So I'm focusing on these two things. And yes, it's true. I would say that forthcoming election in the State Duma is absolutely crucial event, and the key moment of it, not even fabrication and falsification. We're definitely waiting for it. It's a kind of inevitable part of all Russian election. But now, which is more important, it's the right to participate. Now on the panel with us, sitting two my friends, Vladimir Milov, Ilya Yashin, who was not just kicked out from the recent election to the Moscow mayor, Moscow City Duma. They were imprisoned for their attempt to participate. So I would say, and I ask European Parliament and every European politician to treat Russian forthcoming election in the very simple way. If everyone allowed to participate, we can discuss it further. But if some people not allowed to participate, the results of such election will never be recognized. From my perspective, this is the point number one for any discussion with any Russian officials on all levels. The second thing I want to focus is the issue of sanctions, because it's discussion all the time. And so far, I would say that the main approach of the European Parliament, of European country, is to sanction people who are technically do some bad things. For example, on my issue, some people who are literally responsible for poisoning or made some orders, they are sanctioning. So, but I would say that there is no sense to sanction colonels or generals or some people who are definitely not travel a lot all over the world and definitely don't have a lot of estate or bank accounts in Europe. The main question we should ask ourselves, why these people poisoning, killing, and fabricating election? And the answer is very, very simple: money. So European Union should target the money, and Russian oligarchs, not just old oligarchs, but also new ones like this circle of Mr. Putin. They must be real targets of sanction. And let me say it's very straight. Until the most expensive yacht of Mr. Usmanov standing in Barcelona or in Monaco, no one in Russia or in Kremlin even, they not treat European sanction seriously. They just think that they are playing European Union because they are afraid of apply a real sanction against real money. So that have to be a focus. And believe me, that type of sanction would be absolutely welcome among 99% of population. So this sanction, they have to be very popular inside of Russia, and they will be. Just target Russian oligarchs. Just tell Mr. Usmanov, Mr. Abramovich, Mr. Rottenberg, and etc., guys, you are acting against Russian people. You are acting against Europe. You are all of the time advocating that Europe is something very bad. So please, take your yachts and get them somewhere to the nice harbors of Belarusia Republic, something like this. And this one is this approach will be very effective and very welcome again from the Russian people. Last thing I want to mention very shortly, it's the issue of European Court of Human Rights. This is another very fine and very easy way to help Russian people, actually, because now at this moment we have a big, huge pack of decision of European court who are absolutely ignoring from Russian state, and there is no question of the freezing assets or kind of political decisions. This is very simple. If, for example, particular officials or particular judges, they are not following decision of European court, which is formally also recognized by Russia, it's a nice way just to have reasons why not to give them opportunity to go to Europe, travel all over the world, etc., etc. This is a very, very easy and very effective approach to this issue. And I can see that my time is over, and I will be happy to answer more questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexei Navalny. Yes, we will return to you later also during this meeting, answering the questions and comments. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Vladimir Kara-Murza. Mr. Kara-Murza, 7 minutes. Floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payet, members of the committee. Above all, thank you for holding this important hearing and finding an opportunity to do so even in the unusual circumstances of this year. And thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. As you know, in 10 months' time, Russia will be holding a parliamentary election. Now, in a normal political situation, we would already be in a full campaign mode with parties and candidates across the political spectrum preparing for the contest, as happens in every country represented on this committee and in this parliament. Instead, one leading opponent of the current government, former Deputy Prime Minister Boris Nemtsov, is dead, having been gunned down in front of the Kremlin in February of 2015. The organizers of his assassination have not been brought to justice. Another leading opponent, Alexei Navalny, whom you just heard from, was recently poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent prohibited under the Chemical Weapons Convention. Thankfully, he survived, but the chances of him or his supporters being allowed to participate in September's parliamentary election are close to zero. Mr. Navalny's party has received 9 denials of registration from the Justice Ministry, a record even for today's Russia. And he himself has been prohibited from running for any election on any level in Russia on the basis of a Russian court conviction that the European Court of Human Rights has ruled to be arbitrary. The next time you hear from a Kremlin propaganda outlet or from another Western Putin versteher that Vladimir Putin has wide public support in Russia, just ask the obvious question. If he really is so popular, why is he so afraid of a free election? In fact, we haven't had a free election in Russia in 2 decades, and don't take my word for it. According to reports by observer missions from the OSCE and the Council of Europe, the gold standard of European election observation, the last Russian parliamentary election that was assessed to be competitive and democratic was held in December of 1999. A whole generation of Russians has grown up not knowing what a real election looks like, when you don't actually know the results ahead of time. For many years now, our parliament has been, in effect, a rubber stamp, not a place for discussion, in the unforgettable words of its own speaker. But the right to free elections, fundamental as it is not the only right by far that Mr. Putin's regime is denying Russian citizens. Independent media outlets have been silenced or taken over by the state. NGOs and civil society groups have been blacklisted as foreign agents or undesirable organizations. Peaceful demonstrations are routinely dispersed by security forces, and their participants are detained or arrested. In fact, imprisonment of political opponents is becoming a common tool in the Kremlin's toolbox. According to the Memorial Human Rights Center, Russia's most respected human rights organization, there are currently 328 political prisoners in our country. This is a conservative estimate, as this number only includes those cases that have been studied by Memorial and that correspond to the fairly strict Council of Europe definition of a political prisoner, but that number already rivals the late Soviet era. But imprisonment is not the worst that can await those who stand up against the system. As I already mentioned, in February of 2015, Boris Nemtsov, former deputy prime minister and Mr. Putin's most prominent political opponent, was gunned down literally in front of the Kremlin wall. This was the most high-profile political assassination in the modern history of Russia. An officer in the Russian Interior Ministry, subordinate to Kremlin-backed Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, has been convicted for pulling the trigger. None of the organizers or masterminds have been identified or brought to justice. As the recent OSCE report on the Nemtsov case has concluded, the reason for this impunity is to be found not in the capabilities of Russian law enforcement agencies, but in the political will of the Russian government. After all, one does not investigate oneself. There is a growing sentiment in Russian society that we need change, that it's not okay for a European country in the 21st century to be ruled by an authoritarian kleptocracy. You can see this sentiment in the mass street protests like those in Moscow last year, or those in Khabarovsk earlier this summer that are taking place despite the police brutality and the arrests. You can see it in opposition victories in local elections, in those rare cases when opposition candidates are actually allowed on the ballot, as happened this September in Siberian cities in Tomsk and Novosibirsk. You can see it in a recent collapse in public confidence in Vladimir Putin, as reflected in opinion polls, slanted as they are in the context of an authoritarian state with government control over the media. Above all, you can see it in a young generation of Russians that is increasingly involved in civic and political life, and that is increasingly rejecting what the present regime stands for. It is only for Russian citizens to bring political change to Russia, and that change will come. Contrary to what is being trumpeted by the Kremlin's propaganda, we do not ask or want or expect the European Union or any other foreign power to interfere with political developments in our country. What we do expect is that you stay true to your values, that you stop enabling those corrupt and abusive officials and oligarchs who want to steal from our people in Russia and then come and enjoy their loot in European Union countries by spending their holidays, sending their wives and their mistresses on shopping trips, buying up yachts and real estate properties and so on and so forth. This has been happening for far too long. It is heartening to see the European Commission finally moving ahead with enacting the Magnitsky-style mechanism for targeted sanctions on corrupt officials and human rights abusers. And I want to take this opportunity to thank members of the European Parliament from all main political groups who have pushed for years to make this happen. It is time to stop this hypocrisy whereby the people who abuse and attack and undermine the most basic norms of democracy and the rule of law in our country then come to the EU and enjoy the benefits and the privileges and the opportunities that the same norms of democracy and rule of law in the EU. It is time to stop this hypocrisy. It is time to stop this enabling, and it's very heartening to see the Magnitsky mechanism finally moving forward in the European Union. It is also important that the European Union does not accept or legitimize the illegitimate power grab that Mr. Putin is trying to achieve with his constitutional amendments passed this past summer under the cover of the pandemic, including the amendment that would allow him to violate presidential term limits. These amendments were enacted unlawfully, in violation of Russian legislative procedures, and in a sham plebiscite that flunked the most basic norms of Russian electoral legislation and of our commitments under the OSCE. Indeed, you in the European Parliament said it most clearly when you stated in Resolution 2020-277 RSP, passed on the 17th of September, it's the same resolution that talks about the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, and it also states that the recent amendments to the Russian constitution have been, and I quote, illegally enacted and are incompatible with international standards, end of quote. If Mr. Putin attempts to cling to power beyond 2024 in violation of the constitutional term limits, he will become as illegitimate as other dictators who have tried this trick before, from Hugo Chavez to Alexander Lukashenko. And the European Union should respond accordingly, with a clear policy of non-recognition. This month, we are marking the 30th anniversary of the OSCE Charter of Paris for a New Europe. In that document, nations spanning from Vancouver to Vladivostok have pledged to foster relations founded on respect and cooperation and declared respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms to be irrevocable. Both of these promises are still not fulfilled. I hope and trust that one day they will be. And I think it's in the interests of all of us on the European continent, you in the European Union, and us in Russia, to work together to try to bring that day a little bit closer. I thank you very much once again for the opportunity to participate, and I look forward to any questions or comments from members of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kara-Murza. And we proceed with Mr. Vladimir Milov. Mr. Milov, floor is yours for 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a privilege to speak here tonight. And I would agree with my colleagues that the absolutely central question of modern-day Russian politics is the total lack of legitimacy of the Russian government and Vladimir Putin himself. It is very important to understand because Vladimir Putin wants to promote his assertive foreign policy, trying to portray things as though he has this solid backing of the Russian people at home, like anything from 2/3 of 90 or to 90% of Russians support him. This is actually very much over for last few years because we have seen an unprecedented economic crisis. For 7 straight years, real incomes of ordinary Russians have been declining or stagnating. We haven't seen anything like that in more than a quarter of a century. There is no prospects for economic growth. We are in an unprecedented international isolation, and all the dictatorships like China, Iran, and others continue to maintain good relations with Putin's regime. Obviously, Alexander Lukashenko as well, but he has problems at home too. So all these problems keep mounting, and you saw many signs of that in the recent opinion polls. A lot of media outlets have reported that Putin's approval ratings and approval ratings of his ruling United Russia Party has been plunging to historic unprecedented lows. They have been suffering severe blows at the regional and local elections, which take place every year in Russia. And basically, there is a lot of data which shows that Putin's popularity is right now in extremely low numbers. For instance, journalists put forward yesterday on YouTube a very good video I strongly encourage you to watch, when they roam around streets of Moscow and approach people and ask them to sign a petition in support of the ruling party United Russia. I will not dare to quote what people are saying in response, but during like a 7-minute video, they barely found anyone who agreed to support Putin's party. This has a striking similarity with what happened in Belarus this summer, because during the presidential election campaign there were also many videos like that. there is hardly any credible opinion polling in Belarus, but we saw many videos online when people have been approached by somebody with a camera and a mic asking, do they support Lukashenko or not? And you can see that there were very extremely low numbers of those who agreed to say yes. Still, Lukashenko drew 80% support in his results at the August 9th elections. I think you can expect a fairly similar approach from Vladimir Putin and his team, because they understand that in real life, their public support has largely eroded over the past years. So what do? First and foremost, this is what Alexei Navalny has been speaking about. They continue to completely ban any real opposition from participation. And that is a central question when we talk about legitimacy of the Russian government, because, look, I think this question should be put forward absolutely in black and white terms. No real participation of the opposition in elections, no legitimacy, no international recognition of legitimacy of the Russian parliament or the Russian president. Because in cases when we were really allowed to participate, there were a handful, a small number of cases when real opposition were allowed into the races, we actually won or shown a very decent, 20–30% support parliamentary results. If Alexei Navalny's party, which was important to understand, I think Alexei didn't stress that, his party was denied registration by the Russian Ministry of Justice 9 times. And this case is now being considered by the European Court of Human Rights, because this is a totally illegitimate denial of participation. So they keep banning us from races. Right now, they are so panically afraid of losing the parliamentary elections next year. So they introduce a whole bunch of legislation trying to label any dissenter or even somebody remotely reminiscent of an opposition candidate as foreign agent officially, for absolutely no reason, because they've been going along with these accusations of opposition being foreign agents of influence for years. And there has not been a very one single proof of that. It has never been proven that the opposition is working as an agent of somebody but the Russian people from whom we have sufficient support. So I think when you discuss the future relations with Russia and Russian political developments, first and foremost, it's important to understand that Vladimir Putin is heading once again towards a completely falsified and rigged parliamentary elections next year, under probably similar technology that Lukashenko did in the summer, when they do not even pretend to count the votes. They just announce a previously drawn-up result. This is what Lukashenko did, and we expect Putin to do the same in 2021. So I think it's very important to brush off, this aura that Putin wants to portray for himself, pursuing an aggressive and assertive foreign policy, the aura that he has a solid backing at home. He obviously does not. And I think the more this issue is brought up internationally, the more all of us, the free people in Europe, in Russia, and across the world will be successful in changing the politics of Russia and moving towards from an authoritarian mafia dictatorship to a free state where governance is based on the free will of the Russian people, something which we don't have at present. And I would reiterate what Alexei and Vladimir have said. Unfortunately, Europe keeps harboring these corrupt folks who steal the money through mafia dictatorship from the Russian people and actually invest them in European real estate, in yachts, in whatever assets they have in the European Union. That's not good. We strongly urge you to stop encouraging this export of corrupt and stolen money from Russia to Europe. And I think there's a lot European Union can do in this regard. I'll finish here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Milov. And now we continue with Ilya Yashin. Please, Mr. Yashin, floor is yours for 7 minutes.
Коллеги, добрый день. Меня зовут Илья Яшин, я глава муниципального округа в Москве и очень рад возможности выступить сегодня в Европарламенте. Присоединяясь к тому, что было сказано моими коллегами, я хочу обратить внимание на то, что за 20 лет пребывания Путина у власти в России, мне кажется, мы поняли и выучили как минимум одну вещь. Путин абсолютно убежден, что вся политика в мире делается грязными методами, что все политики абсолютно циничны и коррумпированы. Исходя из этого, он выстраивает свои отношения с другими странами, и в его понимании на мировой арене есть несколько влиятельных игроков, с которыми надо договориться за закрытыми дверями и вот разделить, собственно, сферы влияния. Разница только в том, что есть политики, которые свой цинизм и коррумпированность не скрывают, а есть те, которые вот камуфлируют, и они вызывают особое раздражение, потому что, ну, вроде как понятно, что ты такой же, как и все, но почему-то вот ты пытаешься это скрывать и делать вид, что ты лучше, чем есть на самом деле. Я бы добавил еще, что убежденность Путину в собственной правоте дает сотрудничество с некоторыми политиками, в том числе, к сожалению, в европейских странах. Ну, речь идет, например, о некоторых политиках из Италии, из Германии, из Венгрии, там, из других стран Восточной Европы. Путин помогает им медийными ресурсами, организационными ресурсами, в том числе на выборах. Они, в свою очередь, создают, ну, такой плацдарм для политического влияния Кремля на европейской территории. Я бы назвал это такой гибридной агрессией со стороны Путина, которая, ну, по сути, не встречает серьезного сопротивления. Вот эта вот гибридная агрессия, попытки коррумпировать местных политиков, выстраивать в Европе в том числе систему пропаганды и манипулирования общественным мнением, с моей точки зрения, представляет, ну, такую значительную угрозу для всего европейского сообщества. И главный риск здесь, как мне кажется, заключается в том, что время от времени европейские политики, глядя со стороны, допускают, что можно обменивать европейские ценности на экономическую выгоду. То есть закрывать глаза на коррупцию кремлевского истеблишмента, на нарушение прав человека в России ради выгодных контрактов, ну, в первую очередь связанных с нефтегазовым сектором. Мне кажется, это путь в никуда, потому что даже какая-то сиюминутная выгода, если она будет получена, по сути, она в итоге обернется коррозией всей фундаментальной конструкции Европейского Союза и в итоге нанесет огромный вред. С моей точки зрения, отношения с Россией вообще и с Путиным в частности должны базироваться именно на фундаментальных ценностях Европейского Союза. В первую очередь права человека, верховенство права, верховенство закона и гуманизм. Понятно, что формирование демократических институтов в России – это, конечно, там, внутреннее дело российского общества. И никто за россиян эту задачу не решит. Ни европейцы, ни американцы. Пока демократия не станет национальной идеей в России, в нашей стране ничего не изменится. И, конечно, в первую очередь это ответственность российских политиков, мы это прекрасно осознаем, и российского гражданского общества. Но, тем не менее, внимание европейских держав к тому, что происходит в России, имеет большое значение. Ну, как минимум, потому что это повышает личную безопасность и оппозиционных политиков, и активистов гражданского общества. И не надо ходить далеко за примерами. Понятно, что если бы не личные звонки канцлера Меркель, президента Финляндии, личные звонки Путину по поводу судьбы Алексея Навального, когда он лежал в коме в провинциальной больнице после отравления, никто бы его не выпустил на лечение в Германию, и, скорее всего, он вряд ли бы принимал участие в нашем сегодняшнем разговоре. Понятное дело, что личное вмешательство ведущих европейских политиков в его судьбу, ну, по сути, спасло ему жизнь. И мы действительно это очень ценим, Алексей об этом говорил, и я хочу подчеркнуть, что мы действительно это понимаем и очень ценим. Что же касается там более таких глобальных вещей, то действительно, мне кажется, очень важно обращать внимание на то, что в России нарушаются такие фундаментальные права человека, которые гарантированы не только международными обязательствами России, но в том числе и Российской Конституцией, даже после ее изменений, которые были инициированы Путиным. И в частности, ключевая проблема – это недопуск российских политиков, оппозиционных политиков к выборам, о чем тоже уже мои коллеги упоминали. Речь идет не о том, что нам не дают возможность конкурировать в рамках выборных процедур, не в том, что выборы фальсифицируются даже или с нами борются с помощью агрессивной пропаганды. Речь идет о том, что нас лишают даже базового права конкурировать за голоса избирателей, просто не допуская на выборы. И мне кажется, пристальное внимание, фокус на этом имеет большое значение. Что касается санкций, то я не считаю корректным давать советы европейским политикам. Считаю, что это внутреннее дело ЕС, как выстраивать санкционную политику в отношении путинского режима. Но хочу обратить внимание на одну, как мне кажется, важную вещь. Действительно, персональные санкции для Путина и для его окружения гораздо более болезненные, чем санкции, секторальные экономические санкции. Потому что экономические санкции бьют в том числе по уровню жизни российских граждан и обычно используются пропагандой в России для создания образа внешней угрозы, для противопоставления Путина и российского общества, значит, агрессивным заграничным странам, которые вводят эти самые санкции. И на самом деле это помогает Путину в пропаганде, в сухом остатке помогает ему удержать власть. Персональные санкции, напротив, ведут к росту недовольства Путиным со стороны его окружения. Олигархи, коррумпированные чиновники лишаются возможности использовать свои экономические активы за границей. Они перестают быть частью западного общества потребления, что им очень нравится на самом деле. И таким образом возникает раскол между Путиным и его окружением, потому что Путин перестает восприниматься как некий гарант привычного, комфортного уровня жизни для этих самых вот олигархов и коррумпированных чиновников. Это действительно становится проблемой, это приводит к росту напряжения в окружении Путина, и в конце концов это прямой путь к расколу элит внутри Кремля. Поэтому мне кажется, вот у нас в оппозиции давно уже, в общем, выработался такой консенсус по поводу отношения к санкционной политике. Его в свое время сформулировал, позицию в свое время сформулировал Борис Немцов, один из лидеров оппозиции, который был убит в 2015 году. Владимир Кара-Мурза про него упоминал. Выступая перед американскими конгрессменами, Немцов убеждал, что нужно отменить так называемую поправку Джексона-Веника, которая вводила экономические санкции, и вместо нее принять акт Магнитского, то есть заменить политику и санкций против страны пакетом персональных санкций против конкретных чиновников, конкретных олигархов, конкретных людей, которые нарушают права человека в России. И двумя словами, как бы одной фразой Немцов сформулировал эту политику следующим образом. Россию не трогать, негодяев наказывать. Мне кажется, это очень хороший принцип, который должен лечь в основу взаимоотношений между Россией и странами европейского сообщества. Спасибо большое.